Welcome, everyone, to the Week 15 Dolphins Make Me Cry podcast. The Miami Dolphins have won 4 games in a row after starting 1-6, 2-7. They now sit at 6-7 with a primetime Monday night battle in Pittsburgh. Frigid, 15-degree, 60-mile-an-hour winds, allegedly, Pittsburgh, against the Pittsburgh Steelers that have not lost a Monday night game at home since 1991. They have never lost a Monday night game under Mike Tomlin, who's now been the coach, 19, 18, whatever, however many years, long time. And it's really interesting because we'll talk about the Jet game, obviously, from last week with the Dolphins won 34-10, against, essentially a roster that, I actually picked the Jets to win. I don't know, what the hell do I know? Just because I just don't trust the Dolphins. But they outman the Jets. The Jets were playing with Tyrod Taylor at first, and then he gets knocked out, and, they then had essentially a rookie. We'll get into that game, but this is the spot that the Miami Dolphins have been in so many years past, in that big spot where they beat up on some bad teams and they give you the hope. Will this be the time that they actually change the narrative? I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. Not a spoiler alert on my prediction, and I only say that because of the history of the franchise. Now, as we go back on the positive of just obliterating the Jets 34-10, obviously a 3-win team. They've now won 3 straight games against 3-win teams. But again, you play who you play, and you have to, man up and you do what you have to do. And at the end of the day, any team can beat any team in this league on a given day. It's just the way it is. Now, are they going to do it, or is a bad team going to beat a good team consistently? 9 out of 10, no. But the Jets literally got ran over by the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins ended with well over 234 or something yards in total rushing. HN had 91, got banged up in the second quarter, went out, bruised ribs. He'll be fine and good to go for Monday night. Then you saw, Jalen Wright, who was a very forgotten running back on this team, who's kind of struggled and, hasn't looked great in camp. Came back this year, really focused on his body, but he's just not gotten the opportunities. Finally got the opportunity, got less of Ollie Gordon. But the identity of this Miami Dolphins, wow, I wonder where we heard this before. The running game. Wow, what an epiphany. I'm not an NFL coach. I'm not an owner or a scout. I'm just an idiot that does a podcast and goes to almost every game. But wow. Imagine what happens when your team can run the ball and can physically dominate the line of scrimmage for the bulk of the game, and you take a offensive line that has had, basically lost its entire right side in game 1, had to overcome that, finally came up with this 6 lineman, Brunskill package, who's a guy who basically played tight end in college and kind of has that, that big guard but athletic build, to be a 6 lineman. You saw lots of good misdirection. And I'm going to give Mike McDaniel, who I have crushed and killed on so many things, he was forced to change, and he did. Now, that's the positive. The flip side is, why the hell did it take you so long? But we are where we are today. And it probably will be too little too late when it comes to the Dolphins in the postseason. But he's come up with this game plan using Brunskill, using fullback and Ingold, just running the ball. Now, the negative of all of this, and really what got kind of, swept under the rug, is Tua with another poor performance. And what's interesting about all of it is, to McDaniel's credit, he sees that Tua is not what he was. Whatever the issues are, I've talked about it many times, the hip, the mobility, too many people in his ears, trying to stay healthy. He's got a lot going on, in fairness to him, but he has been very, very ineffective and very pedestrian. And what I think will be the ultimate downfall of this team as it comes to this season and any hope of quote unquote running the table to get to 10-7, which I think is a pipe dream, is the fact that there are no other weapons on this team other than Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle. They get literally nothing out of these other wide receivers. And I said it last week, Leopards don't change their spots. And if you think a team's going to magically figure it out in week 15 going into, the last 4 games of the season, you're crazy. But this is the spot. If you look at this Monday night game, like clearly you'd come out running the ball again. But the thought process has to be, what if the Steelers stuff the run? Then what is the alternative? What is the counterpunch? And that's always been Mike McDaniel's bugaboo as a head coach offensively, is they have the plan, but when it comes to we got to switch and we got to change it up in a game, it very rarely comes to fruition. And you just wonder in a game like this where you just know you got Aaron Rodgers, who's a big game player, even at his age, played very well last week against Baltimore. The Steelers are no world beaters. They're 7-6. We're 6-7. They've had their struggles. Offensively, they've scored some points. They're in that 25 a game range. They can score. They can do some things. They have a run game here and there. Their defense is decent, not great. They've had their struggles. This is the Jalen Ramsey revenge game for everything that went on here with him last year, the offseason, the turmoil, the issues with him and McDaniel, the contract, the money, all of that. So that's going to be a big headline, trading Minkah Fitzpatrick going back to Pittsburgh. But when you look at this game, I look at it as running the ball, doing the things that you did, but they need Tua Tagovailoa to step up and not be a reactionary piece of the puzzle. They need him to be a proactive piece of the puzzle. If I'm actually running the game plan of this game, and again, I want to be run first, I want to establish the line of scrimmage, I want to do the things that they've done. However, I might flip it a little bit on a dime, not completely, but a little bit, particularly in a first drive if you get the ball or whenever you get the ball first, and try to make something happen. I'm not saying deep shots to Waddle or things like that, but trying to get them on their heels if they're committing to taking away the run and passing the ball. Waller would be, to me, an X factor. Didn't really do much last week, has been just spotty, didn't do much against New Orleans, had 2 or 3 catches for 40-something yards. But establishing Tua in the game and that pass game in a safe way, then banging with the run game, and then off of that, hitting with the play action game. And yeah, if you have a deep shot, awesome. But no more stupidity. We're just throwing it up as a quote unquote punt. That's how I would manage and handle this game from an offensive perspective. When you look at this win streak, it has been domination on the ground, the things that we've been screaming about for years for this team. And it was basically, yes, you want to give Mike McDaniel and the coaching staff a hell of a lot of credit for the things that they've done, creativity. And look, they could have completely folded up shop and, you could be sitting here with 2 or 3 wins and maybe he's fired. And obviously Greer already got fired. And, lo and behold, isn't that interesting? You fire him and they win 4 in a row. Isn't that amazing? But when you look at it, where was this to begin with, and how is this not recognized to begin with? Even in 2023, you had that run game. It wasn't a run first, but you had it. And then you had obviously the threats of Tyreek and what Tyreek did and Waddle. And it just leads you to believe kind of what were they thinking going into this year? Did they not understand the personnel that they had? Obviously, you had Tyreek. But it just goes to show you that, when you have to make certain things happen and make changes, you can do so. Now, onto the defensive side of the ball. Another thing, when you really look at it, Anthony Weaver, as a coach, he struggled early on. But again, in fairness, the guy's trying to make chicken salad out of chicken shit with a lot of the defensive lack of talent. But what he's done for the defense now that has given up less than 18 points a game in the 4 games. They're much better against the run. Not perfect, but much better against the run. You're getting a hell of a lot more out of the defensive linemen. You're getting insane play out of Brooks and Dotson at the linebacker position. You're getting a lot out of the corners where they're not killing you. And they're, for who they are, a lot of the no-name corners that you have and rookies and kind of journeyman-type players that they have, no dominant corner there, they've done some decent work. The physical defense, smart at times. They're getting to be more opportunistic. You're getting much more out of Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's obviously a very, dynamic player, even though he's a little older and, not going to do as much as he used to. But you're getting a pass rush. You're doing some things here. Plus, you're getting that complementary football of it's not a 3 and out because we're throwing it so much. We're running it. We're grinding down the game, grinding clock, having longer sustained drives, a lot of good productivity out of the punt game. Kicking game hasn't killed you either with the backup kicker. And this defense, lo and behold, has been very good, very stout, very opportunistic, and has not made the boneheaded, missed assignment type scenarios. And the thing that really does go under the radar, I'm going to give them a lot of credit, is lack of, stupid penalties. They've had knock on wood, they've had a hell of a lot less in the way of stupid penalties, false starts, offsides, delay of games, a lot of the dumb coaching nonsense that you dealt with earlier on in the season and in years past. There's been a lot of tightening up here when it comes to the overall operation of the team. Is it perfect? Hell no, it's not. There's certainly things that they can improve on. And again, we know the talent or the lack thereof in the teams that they played, but you can see a little bit more of I don't want to say they're playing at a playoff level, but they're playing at a much higher level. And now this is the game. And when you look back on the years of all the big games that it was like the pivotal moment for the team. And a lot of people this week have said, this is the biggest game McDaniel's coached, which is not. The biggest game he coached was don't get me started, Buffalo blowing the division at home Sunday Night Football. Let's say this is the second biggest. And when you look back in his era, that was the biggest game that they blew. The game in, let's say, San Francisco at 8-3, 2022. The game in Baltimore, where whoever won was essentially going to be the 1 seed coming out of it. They got destroyed 56-19. You go back 2021, the game where they had the 7-game win streak and, totally shit the bed in the cold in Tennessee. The game last year in Green Bay. There's so many pivotal games where they're big games, big moments, prime time that you want to believe, and then bang, you come back down to earth. To me, you have to change my mind. I've lived this life too long for you to fool me. And I need to see them come out and win the big game before I'm ever going to sit here and predict and believe that they can win the big game. Do they have the ability? Do they have the kind of the way they're playing in this sense to win not only a big game in prime time, but in the cold, in this frigid weather? Last week wasn't too bad, but it was a cold weather game. And, they lo and behold, the run game travels in the cold as well. So does a good defense travels in the cold, a hard-hitting tackling defense that they've become, specifically with Brooks at linebacker leading the charge and leading the league in tackles. So you like the way they're playing outside of the quarterback position for this particular spot. But will history of the Miami Dolphins in big spots, in December, in the cold, in these games that are must-wins, where if anything else, you should be in the game. We're not sitting here facing this world beater, undefeated team. They're the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they got a lot of flaws like you do. And they got an old quarterback who sometimes he can look like the old Aaron Rodgers, and sometimes he can look like, the 40, whatever he is, 43, 44-year-old Aaron Rodgers. But can the Dolphins, in this spot on a Monday night, silence critics, get themselves back to 7-7, giving themselves home game next week against Cincinnati, home game against Tampa, and then finishing it off in New England. And now here's when you look at everything, right? You say, not to jinx anything here, TJ Watt is out for this game. He had some issue that he was in the hospital. He's out. That's a big help plus for you. Burrow's not playing this week not playing in their game this week, which maybe he's not going to play next week. They already flexed that game, thank God, to a Sunday afternoon as opposed to a Sunday night, which is great. Tampa's come down to earth with a bad loss. New England's probably going to have it wrapped up. So when you break it down, and again, you can't get ahead of yourself. When you break some of these things down, some of these things are breaking right for you. And then I'm going to tell you the biggest thing that I think is breaking right for this team, and it's overall health. They, knock on wood, have stayed relatively healthy. They had a lot of their big injuries earlier in the year. They've gotten some guys back. They've gotten more production out of rookies, out of backups. But they have not had like these crazy injuries, in each of these, let's say 5-6 games. They've stayed relatively healthy. They've gotten guys back. They've gotten fresh. They had a bye week. So this is lining up for you to silence critics, to, shut up narratives of, Tua can't play. Tua can't play in prime time. Tua can't win big games. The team can't win big games. They can't win in the cold. All of these things that as Dolphin fans, we know we've dealt with. I can go down the list. I went down just ones in the last 3-4 years. I can go down the list in my life as being a Dolphin fan of the big spot moments where you were like, man, that's the one. They're pretty good, but this one will take them over the top, and then bang, they shit the bed. This is that game. This is that moment. And us as Dolphin fans and dealing with this shit season we've dealt with that it's now kind of turning around, we deserve this one. We deserve this. Here's the other side of the coin. If you lose, you could legitimately be knocked out of the playoffs this week. If Buffalo wins and you lose, and there's one other scenario, I have to go through it. Is there so many? I think it's the Chargers winning. You could be essentially knocked out you'd be 6-8 by the end of the weekend, and then that gives you 3 meaningless games, which would suck. So, we got to keep the ball rolling here, and it's all in your court. And let's just face facts. Even at 10-7, they need a lot of help because of the tiebreakers. But could you get me there? You know what I mean? Get me out of this game feeling good, winning this, getting the 7-7 with a home game against the Bengals team with 9 losses and probably no Joe Burrow. Give me that shred of hope to feel good off of the just dreadful beginning of the 1-6 and 2-7 that we dealt with, blowing the 17-point lead in Carolina, the Achane going out against the New England Patriots, the almost sack against Herbert that you should have won, the 3 games that you should have won, even if you won one of them or 2 of them, that you'd be in a different situation right now and we'd be having different conversations. But that being said, this is a huge game for the Dolphins on Monday night in Pittsburgh to silence some critics, to live to fight another day, to see if maybe, just maybe, miracles will happen for them to get into the playoffs as a 7 seed. It would be incredible. But when it comes to what I think is going to happen, here's where we're going to go. So, Steve Gio's Week 15 Miami Dolphin pick in the league where they play for pay on Monday night. Dolphins at Steelers Acrisure Stadium, used to be Heinz Field. It is going to be 15 degrees. The Dolphins are a 3.5-point underdog on the road. The over-under is 41.5. This is the atmosphere that a tough team, tough at the line of scrimmage, tough in the trenches, will dig down deep in the cold and smack the guy in front of them and make plays and get tough yards and then open up for a couple of big plays. It's probably going to be one of those, back and forth slugfest type of games because of the weather and the nature of who these two teams are. To me, in a big spot, I will believe the Dolphins can win a big game in a big spot when they actually prove me wrong and win a big game in a big spot. I want to believe, I want to think that things are going to be different based on what they're doing with the run game, the defense, and then again, that X factor. Can Tua Tagovailoa actually do enough and not just basically be there like he has been in the last 2 to 3 weeks where he's just a placeholder and the run game is winning it in the defense? Can he actually make plays? My prediction, I think, tight-knit game, tough, hard-fought game. I think the Steelers will win this game 27-17. I think the Dolphins will be semi in the game, particularly in the early stages. I think they're going to get our hopes up, and then I think the Steelers will ultimately pull away. And I think by Tuesday morning, we will be out of the playoff mix, and we're going to sit here and try and figure out what are we doing with the next 3 games? What are we doing with next season with Mike McDaniel, with Champ Kelly GM, with Tua's contract? All the questions will be swirling, but maybe I'm going to be wrong like I was last week, and we're going to wake up Tuesday morning at 7-7 in the mix with the Bengals coming in at home with 9 losses, with Joe Burrow out, with Tampa coming in, and we can find our ways on that road to 10-7. So let's hope I'm wrong in my prediction. Let's go Dolphins. Monday Night Football. Let's bring it. We're tired of losing. Win a big game on the road on Monday night and keep the dream alive. We'll see you next week. Let's go Fins.